Hi YouTube. So I got my coffee and I did manage to get out into the bush a little bit, not too much. It's still really wet out here. It stopped raining finally, but it is it is still a little bit wet out here. At any rate, what I wanted to do today was just go over a really quick portion of the apologetic which I found interesting, and it has to do with when Cy is preparing his troops to go out into the world and street preach or come across people at the Reason Rally and that sort of thing. And really, I have to say, the more that I watch this, the more I realize there's really not much point in debating Cy or any other presuppositional apologist. Not that there was before, but I guess it's kind of like when Eric Hovind says, you know, he is open-minded, but he's closed-minded to the truth, and he loves science. So, I mean, obviously you would not invite Eric Hovind to join you in a scientific exploration, right? Because he's closed-minded on what he claims to be certain truths. So they're not even up for investigation. They're not up for question, and that's obviously not how we go about the scientific method. And same with Cy, of course. Now, what I found really cute was he gives one little lecture or sermon, whatever you want to call it, where he talks to a group of the faithful, and he says, I'd like to introduce you to a man, and this man is watches everything you do, and this man knows what you've done wrong and right, good and bad. And if you live a righteous life and a good life, that he will reward you. And the great part is these rewards are free, ultimately free. The problem is you can't live a righteous life. It's impossible for us to live perfect lives, so you actually fall short. But the good thing is, if you believe in this man, he'll grant you this stuff anyway. And he says, ladies and gentlemen, I've been gifted a relationship with this man when I was, since I was a child. I'd like to introduce you to him. His name is Santa Claus. And then he says, but Cy, do you have any evidence for this Santa Claus? And he says, well, of course I do. He leaves presents under the tree. I leave milk and cookies out every night, and the milk and cookies are gone in the morning. And presents are left under the tree, and every one of them has a tag that says, from Santa Claus. And obviously, it's really ironic that he's really painting the picture for something that's really one step removed from the claims of God. He's really short just a manuscript with a few declarative statements, right? I mean, someone should have been Santa's publicist, I suppose, and helped him out with that. But anyway, what he says is, after he's gone through this little analogy of this man that exists that gives you everything if you just believe and that sort of thing, is he says, if what we as Christians believe is not true, we would be defending Santa Claus. And how do we know that we're not defending Santa Claus? Because what we believe is true. So, and only because of a few declarative statements, right? So, entering into a debate with someone like this would be absolutely ridiculous. I used to think to myself, man, if Christopher Hitchens was still alive, I'd love to see that debate. I don't think that anymore for two reasons. One, I don't think Hitch would do it, because it really is beneath him, quite frankly, and it would be beneath a scientist to engage in some sort of exploration into the, with Eric Hovind, right? Someone who's closed-minded to the truth. And for another reason, well, like I said, I don't think Hitch would do it. And for another reason, I don't think I'd want to see it. I mean, it would just be, sorry, there's mosquitoes out here today. It would just be mopping the floor. And as much as some of us love to engage in that, I don't really want to see that, because it's pointless. The evidential argument's been mopped to death, and that's one of the reasons that he gives in this little sermon to his group, is he explains why he doesn't use the evidential argument. And he basically says, it's great, actually. I would copy and paste if someone wants to tear apart the teleological, cosmological, even Pascal's wager. he gives actually some great refutations himself. So he really pares down the argument to only the presuppositionalist argument, because he shows why they're all bad arguments. And Pascal's wager as well, because basically what he says is, even if you were to accept the premises of those arguments, all they do is they point to a probable God. They don't lead you to the Christian God, and they don't lead you to a certain God. Now, he claims that he's led to a certain God by divine hoo-hoo. That's it. There's nothing else there. And so his presuppositional argument is no more founded than any of the others. But he's willing to stand on that, on this, sort of virtual circular argument, right? I justify my reasoning because of my reasoning is a viciously circular argument, and I justify everything that I, stand on divine revelation that I can't prove is virtuously circular, which I find interesting as well, because of course the virtue hasn't been proven either. So the first around and around we go. So anyway, I know this isn't exactly any of the subroutines of the actual presuppositional argument, but I did want to bring this forth because I thought it was cute, this whole Santa Claus analogy that he gives, and how he really paints the picture. I mean, he really paints, unfortunately for him, Jesus Christ, the God, as ridiculous as Santa Claus, because aside from a declarative manuscript, they're the same damn thing. And so I guess what it all comes down to is, through my little journey of watching the presuppositionalist videos and arguments and that sort of thing, is I've just come to realize that this isn't at first I thought, well, here's something I can contribute to because it hasn't been dealt with as much as all the evidential arguments. But the more I realize it, the more I watch it, the more I realize this is an apologetic for the low-hanging fruit. Because there's nobody who's really that rooted in logic and a quest for truth that's going to be swayed by this argument. You're going to have a few people who haven't given it a lot of thought and are either not that willing to invest themselves mentally in the circus that is the presuppositional apologetic, and it just sounds good to them, or some people who sort of felt like they were being called already, or people who maybe thought they were Christians but didn't realize, Cy puts them right, that they weren't good enough Christians or weren't really Christians all along. And they're going to get those people, and they're not going to, they're not going to convince anybody else. And I'm not sure the apologetic is designed to. One final note I would say too, I think a lot of it is dishonest, and there's little bits of dishonesty sprinkled here and there throughout the apologetic. I don't think Cy can make the argument without himself having to sit down and be a little bit honest with himself that he's not being quite forthright. But one of the things that I noticed, I can't remember which Bible verse it is, where they talk about, be prepared to give an answer to every man who asks why you have hope or the reasons that you have hope. And I'm not sure if you manipulate someone into asking, is that still asking? I'm not sure. At any rate, just a couple of thoughts that I had to, put together on this day off after pretty nasty migraine headache. I do have a couple of uploads yet that are coming on the regular sort of subroutines that he utilizes in the debates. I'll be uploading them this week as time and bandwidth permit. So, hi folks. It's still Migraine Monday. I made it all the way down to the truck and checked my notes, which I forgot to bring with me the first time. And I realized there was a couple of points that I meant to bring up, which I forgot. So I thought, well, I'll just traipse back up into the bush and get my pants and shoes all wet and record another video. So here I am again. I'll toss the notes aside for now. I think I know what I need to know what I wanted to say. The first one, again, is not necessarily in the normal presuppositionalist debate tactic subroutines, but it is part of the basis. It forms part of the basis for that. And that is when he was speaking to his gathering there, preparing them for street apologetics and unleashing them at the Reason Rally. He talked a little bit about who needs proof that God exists. And of course he says, nobody needs proof that God exists. He gives a long list, Muslims, Buddhists, atheists, agnostics, who all needs proof. He says basically no one needs proof that God exists. And of course he quotes a Bible scripture for that, that God has made it plain to them, the invisible nature, qualities of God have been made plain to them, which I'm not sure what invisible means anymore. At any rate, you know, that they are without excuse, etc., etc. And he said, now what, Batsai, what about the deep jungles of South America? What about those people? They've surely never been exposed to Christianity. And he says, you're right. You know, if they didn't know God exists, it would be wrong to send missionaries in there, because they would actually have an excuse then if they didn't believe in God, if they didn't know God. The reason we send missionaries in there is because they do know God, so they are without excuse. But without Christianity, without Christ, they'll go to hell. This is really, really convenient by omission, because, of course, what he's leaving out are people who didn't have an opportunity to hear about Christianity. And I know this sort of backs back into sort of moral/evidential argumentation, but I find it interesting that he conveniently leaves out, say, Aboriginal Australian tribes many, many years ago, or pre-Columbian people, pre-Columbian era in the Americas. These people not only didn't know of Christ, they wouldn't have had a chance to know about Christ, right? And of course, there's certainly nothing in any of their legends or any of their folklore that talk about a Christ figure. They're all idols, right? If you're gonna say that they were worshiping idols, they were all idols. There was no Jesus Christ. And I find it interesting that he sort of glazes over that. He'll talk about current times, why we send missionaries in there, but his just God seems to have no problem. Again, like I said, this is getting back to the moral evidential arguments and that sort of thing, but his just God seems to have no problem punishing people for an eternity. And of course, as usual, how do we know that everyone doesn't need proof, that everyone knows that God exists? Well, because he tells us so, right? I mean, it's your typical virtuously circular scripture, apparently. So again, I find it wholly inconvenient for him to discuss anything to do with anybody who actually wouldn't have a hope in hell, pardon the pun, of ever finding out about Jesus Christ, and therefore would be going straight to hell, regardless of their God being just. And I'll close out with an interesting little tidbit. He talks about giving an answer to everyone who asks, and doing it with gentleness and respect. But I find it interesting that he quotes a Bible verse that says, "We take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ." I'm not sure how you can do that gently. How do you gently commandeer someone's every thought and make it obedient, right? I mean, this is not gentleness and this is not respect. And I think that any God who would create sentient creatures with free will would be violating its own sort of sense of decency by commandeering thoughts and capturing them to be obedient to him. So at any rate, just a couple of thoughts for today. I'll get back to my normal subroutines apologetics over the next few weeks. Like I said before, I've got a couple of videos to upload. I'll do those this week, and then we'll see where it takes me. I've had some interesting video views the last few days, which I'm putting on the back burner for now, but I think I'm going to make a video series on them soon, so hopefully stay tuned for that. But until then, my shoes and pants are already wet, so I think I'm going to continue my little walk through the bush and enjoy what's left of today, and hit work tomorrow, hopefully fully energized. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.